Hey guys, welcome in. This is Dixie. I have an update for you on a big brain book, which is Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen. It took me about a month, maybe a little bit more, to read this book, and I have a lot of thoughts. But my review could be summed up like this. No, I'm just kidding. There are a lot of things that I loved about this book, and there are a lot of things that I didn't love, and I think that makes a really interesting read. So let's get started. As I've mentioned in other videos, I have decided to kind of read some more big brain books. Oh, don't mind me. I cut myself on an Amazon package. Anyway, big brain books, meaning like kind of a little bit more difficult literary fiction. Years ago, I used to read a lot of that, and I've kind of gotten away from it to read more thrillers and just kind of lighter reads. And so when I found Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen at a book sale this year, I picked it up. It did not have a dust jacket. This is what you see is what you get. I have read Jonathan Franzen's Corrections, of the Corrections book, and I really remember enjoying it. I actually went on a little scavenger hunt to find a new copy, so I will be rereading that. I wouldn't say in the near future, because I've kind of had my fill of Franzen for a while with this sucker. But I did pick this up at the book sale, and I do want to give a PSA to those of you who buy used books. I freeze all of my books for probably about a week, if not a little bit longer. And I'm very glad that I did that with this book, because there were tiny little dead bugs all over it, inside of it. So the reason I freeze books is that a good friend of mine had a really bad bed bug problem many years ago, and it kind of scarred me that she had this problem. So when you do get new books, or even library books, I will freeze them for at least a few days. Like I said, I usually do about a week or so, just to make sure that they're not alive. Not to freak anyone out, but I thought I'd pass that along. So let me talk about the book, kind of broad overview. I don't want to give away a lot to those of you who may read it. So Crossroads is actually going to be a trilogy. This is the first book of the trilogy. The name of the trilogy is here. I forget what the overarching title of it is. It's a long one for me. It's a 580-page novel. It came out in 2021, kind of the height of the pandemic, and Jonathan Franzen, I will talk about later, kind of some of his press for it and what they had to do. But it follows the Hildebrandt family, and it's one of his books where, pretty much all of his books that I've encountered have the same pattern of multiple points of view. In this case, it's the Hildebrandt family, and the mother and father, Russ and Marion. Russ is a pastor, and Marion is like a stay-at-home wife with kind of big secret. Russ also has a big secret. Everybody in this book has a big secret or a secret desire that we kind of track along with the characters. It is written in third person, but he does kind of go omniscient into their minds. The kids in the book are Clem is the oldest, then Becky, then Perry, then Judson. So there's 4 kids, 2 parents, and we get the perspective of everybody except the youngest child, which is Judson. I believe he is 6 years old. Clem is college age, Becky is late high school, and Perry is, I think, 15. All of the characters, like I said, have kind of a secret flaw to them or desire. And if you look at Goodreads, a lot of people complain about this book being filled with unlikable characters. And I think that that's a phrase that gets thrown around quite a lot lately, especially if you read the reviews on Goodreads. Some characters aren't meant to be likable. Some characters have deep flaws, and I think that that's a good thing. I think as a writer myself, you need that to push your story forward. So not every character can be likable. So basically, this book takes place in 1971, and we follow the family quite closely around Christmas time, and then around kind of the midway point or so, we go into like springtime and Easter. And then the very end of the book, it time jumps, which I'll talk about in a little while. I want to first talk about the things I liked about this book, because I think there's a lot of merit to his writing in particular. He's a wonderful writer. He has beautiful sentences. I don't tab books, but I did for the sake of this video. So what happened was I started reading on here. Then I moved to my Kindle after I saw all of the bugs. Even though they were dead, it creeped me out. And then I went to the audio to finish it. So I will give that caveat. I did read it in different formats. I mean, same text and everything. But I think that is kind of an interesting way to do things. Usually I commit to either reading the physical or listening to the audio. There were even portions of this book where I was sitting outside on a patio and I was listening to the audio and following along on my Kindle. So if you do that, let me know in the comments. I found that to be a very interesting experience because the cadence of reading in my head didn't follow the cadence of the narrator. So it was kind of a mismatch for me. Back to the point. Some of his sentences are really beautiful, and I will actually go ahead and read some of those just for the sake of giving you an idea. So this says, after his humiliation, he'd hidden in his office and ached amid the fading totems of a youth that no one but his wife found interesting anymore. I love it. Here's another one. When you were poor, it could be hard to see what needed doing until someone showed you by doing it. Kind of interesting concept on that one. He should have bore it stoically, but on his bad days, he was unable not to do things he would later regret. It was almost as if he did them because he would later regret them. You can see the character flaws coming out in just these few sentences, and these are just the ones I highlighted kind of from the beginning. What would it be like to live with a person capable of joy? Somber book. Franzen himself says there's a lot of humor in this. I found a little bit of humor and a lot of somber. Heads up. An absence of negatives wasn't necessarily a positive. And then there's a little exchange of dialogue that I highlighted. I won't read that, but there's a quite snappy dialogue in a couple places in this novel. And a lot of it's sentimental language too, which not everyone likes. So this, for example, she was amazed she never noticed until today how precious ordinary life was and how lucky she was to be a part of it. So much goodness. Sentimental. And then there's really good descriptions he did, like Clem's friends in high school had mostly been slide rule types, guys with dandruff-coated glasses. I thought that was such a apt description of a nerd. I just loved it. And then I also actually had a few quotes that I highlighted on my Kindle. And I'll read just a couple of those. With a mouse-butchering hand, he brushed hair from her eyes and stroked her head. It's a car salesman trick, making people afraid they don't have your approval. They'll do anything to get it, and they never stop to wonder why they even want it. And then this fragment, which I really liked. A single librarian holding down the circulation desk amid the silence of books waiting to be wanted. I just love it. There's so much beauty in his words. And it's such a pity that this book ended up not being one of my favorites. It did start out a 5-star, I will say that. The characters were very interesting to me. Very flawed. And like I said, I do think that is important in writing to have. I also like the glimpse of pastoral life. I often wonder about pastors and kind of who they really are and like how the power of being in a position of power kind of impacts their lives. My last video I did how I'm reading the Bible. I don't go to church. I'm not preaching to anybody. So yeah, I do have an interest in religion and Christianity. So if that's not something that you like or if that triggers you, I would not recommend this book because a lot of it is about religion and Christianity and morality. So I'm going to put that caveat out there. Another thing I liked about this book, there was an excellent mental breakdown scene and the pacing and the payoff on it was mind-blowing. I had to put the book down. I could not believe the artistry in what I just read and how he captured a mental break. Now, I don't know if that's what really happens when people do have like a fit of madness like that, but it captivated me. It really captivated me. So I'll give him that. Just like in the corrections, he wrote from the perspective of someone with, I believe, dementia, and just the perspective of it and what they saw in the world and how he conveyed it was just so beautiful. And so he did it again. He did it. He's capable of pulling something like that off. That is almost like fiction as a work of art in a museum where you just stop and like hold your breath. So I'll give him that. It was also interesting, the theme of like the character's inner world versus their outer circumstance and the incongruence between the two. I found that interesting. I think some people would find them, like I said, just to be unlikable, period. So, and also the sacrifices that are made for family and for sanity that don't always pay off. I think that was an interesting theme, and I haven't seen a lot of that. And some of this, you know, on a very lighter comparison note, reminded me of like Little Miss Sunshine, where the whole family, everybody's falling apart, but the one girl has a dream, and then they all have to make sacrifices to make it happen. It's the same kind of theme, but much darker in this book. So I will give you that. And everybody has their own desires that come through really strongly. Oh, don't mind me itching my ear. Dislikes. Let's start with the dislikes. I made a lot of notes, guys, because this book is so expansive. The last half to a third or so, like I said, by that point, I was probably strictly listening to audio at quite a big speed jump. I think I was listening to it at 1.6 or something like that speed. It just, the ending, they go to Arizona. Not everybody in the family, but there's a huge Arizona component. And it lost me. It lost me. I got really sick of Russ, the father main character. I didn't want to read him anymore. And I've heard from other reviewers on YouTube that was something that they struggled with as well. Russ is a very pathetic character. He's just pathetic is the best word. The other thing I didn't like about the last bit is especially the ending. The ending, there was not a payoff. The ending did not make me want to read the next 2 books in the series at all. Like, at all. And it was really time jumpy at the end, whereas the beginning was seriously like just, you know, a few weeks of time. And I felt like that microscopic view was much, much better than him doing all these weird time gaps and jumps. I mean, he took us along the whole book only to have us then just out of it when major things were happening to main characters, and then hearing about it through letters and years after the event. It didn't make any sense to me at all. And sometimes throughout the book, and he is known for this, his backstory that he weaves in can be a lot. I mean, I think he even mentioned himself in an interview for this book that there's like a 40-page backstory story embedded within, and it's like, it's too much. It's hard to follow the linear story. I mean, some of the backstory is necessary, but I think he needs to be mindful of that. You know, and then there was the fact that you're reading about essentially, and I don't think this gives away too much, but a lot of the characters do end up getting what they want in the end, and what they wanted and what they envisioned was nothing like they actually wanted in real life. So the disappointment of getting what you want sometimes in life is a lot to swallow, and I think I don't want to read about that. To me, that's a very difficult thing in life, and I don't think he brought anything especially new to that concept. You know, and this is the other part of my review, and I will soon be done with this rant, but what I find interesting is Franzen himself. At the end of this book, on the audio version, there was a conversation between the audiobook narrator, him, and some weird host girl that really didn't host at all. She was just kind of there. And he talked about how his assistant like looked up stuff for this book and how he just has to write a first draft and then his editors kind of take over from there. And to me, this all reflects in his writing now. He isn't hungry enough as a writer anymore. He is phoning it in, essentially. And I get really frustrated with that because he has been living the successful writer life for so long. It's like, do you get burnt out? Because the reason I bring that up is somebody on Goodreads. So like I mentioned earlier, this book came out during the pandemic and he did a book tour, which was basically speaking engagements online virtually. And one Goodreads reviewer said that they went to one of these virtual events, and when he was asked the question, why are there so many religious themes and threads throughout this book, he basically said, and I think this is a direct quote, that the religion was the only thing left in the drawer for him to write about. The other thing he said, which I thought was interesting, was this book only took him 26 months to write, which sounds like a lot. That's over 2 years. But it's so expansive and so depth. There's so much depth of character. And I just wonder if he actually spent the time to edit himself and to go deeper and to really sit with the story longer. I think it would have been better. I mean, if you look at like Donna Tartt puts out a book every 10 years, 15 years. I think he needed more time, especially if he was just scrambling for anything to write about. In my process as a writer, I think he just needed to be more patient. And he needed to find something that excited him, not that what was left in the drawer. And maybe I'm just reading too much into that, but I thought that was a very insightful comment, especially one that somebody pinged enough to mention in a review. And then he discussed in this little talk at the end of the audiobook how he is going to do the next book as a 30-year time jump into the future. And then he kind of complained about how he would have to invent and write and come up with new characters and how that just slows him down. And it's like, poor you. Poor you, Jonathan Franzen, you whiny little bitch, okay? I'm someone, personally, and I don't like to talk about my writing on the channel. I've had a whole career of writing, and I am currently trying to sell a novel. And I just think, really? Really? You're going to complain about having to write more characters? It's going to come across in your writing. Just like a cook who is anxious and angry, it will come across in their food. This is my belief. Call me crazy or not. So, you're supposed to separate the art from the artist, but I do think it's an interesting behind the scenes look at kind of his sentiment around this book and where he was coming from and where he's at in his journey as a writer. I just think it shows. Again, I've only read the corrections, and I didn't mention this earlier, I did read Freedom. I think that was his follow-up to the corrections, if I'm not mistaken, and I had to DNF it. It was interesting. Another Goodreads reviewer on this particular book, Crossroads, said, if you are under 40 years old, you will not understand this book. This book will be a slog. It'll be awful for you. And I think with Freedom, I was too young to read it at the time. That is one I might give a second chance to. This series, the next 2-3 books, especially if they're super long. To me, anything over 500 pages is super long. Even 400, which they will be because that's what he does. I don't know if I'll keep reading it. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Did you read this? Do you freeze your books? If you did read this, would you go ahead and read the next 2 books, or is there something I'm missing? I honestly thought about this for a couple days, guys, and this is the best I can do as far as a review on this book. It honestly has left me kind of angry and feeling like an idiot. So, on to the next. I will be doing my August TBR coming up next, and we will move on from Jonathan Franzen for now. All right, take care, keep reading. See you next time.